Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. A strange, inexplicable state enveloped him. He felt every cell of his body, but was a prisoner, deprived of the ability to move. Smells and sounds penetrated his consciousness, but remained a mystery, devoid of meaning and name. His mind was empty, an absolute terrifying void, as if the world in which he had once existed had been erased without a trace, taking all his memories with it. He could not remember himself, nor what was happening, nor his location, nor the reason for his presence here. He was lying down. That was the only thing he knew for sure. Everything else, including his own name, thoughts, and feelings, was hidden behind a thick, impenetrable veil of fog. Gathering his last strength, as if preparing for danger, he tried to open his eyes. His eyelids fluttered, and through the absolute darkness, shimmering with colored dots, barely noticeable, tiny glimmers of light broke through. They widened, merged, turning into two trembling slits, and the next moment his eyes were flooded with bright daylight. An unbearable pain pierced his head, making him squeeze his eyes shut in fear and silently beg for the return of the blessed darkness he had so rashly lost. There, in oblivion, it was calm. Now, chaotic, boundless pain tore at his consciousness. It was absolute, omnipresent, and unbearable, the strongest he had ever experienced. This, remembering nothing, he knew with absolute clarity. A low, plaintive moan escaped his chest, and moments later, he felt a sweat-soaked strand of hair creep away from his forehead. Something cool and soft settled on his skin, bringing instant relief, calming the raging hammers and saws in his head. The touch was pleasant, soothing. It took away some of the agonizing pain. His nostrils, convulsively flared, caught a light, barely discernible aroma, a bizarre blend of freshness, tartness, and sparkle, simultaneously familiar and completely new. Then he felt life-giving moisture on his dry, sore lips, a blessed feeling as the liquid flowed down his rough throat. A light prick in the shoulder, like a mosquito bite, followed immediately. He mumbled gratefully in relief and heard a voice, thin, like a silver bell, quiet, like rustling grass, gentle, like a kitten's purr. "Well, that's good, very good. Just wonderful that you've woken up," it sounded above him. "And now you need to rest, sleep. Lullaby, lullaby, sleep and wake up. Well, almost well. Sleep." The wonderful sounds of the voice drifted away, fading, and the last thought that flashed through his mind was completely childish. Could Mom be back? This effort deafened him with a final volley of pain, and he instantly sank into silence and darkness. Thump, 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 thump. A quiet but rhythmic sound slowly penetrated his consciousness. He took a long time to gather his strength, remembering the terrible outcome of his previous attempt to open his eyes. Finally, bracing himself for pain, he cautiously opened one eye, listened to his sensations, and feeling no threat, parted his eyelids. This time he didn't squeeze his eyes shut from pain, but from amazement. Right in front of him, staring with huge blue eyes, was a gnome. A real gnome. Short, half a human's height, with a long gray beard, bushy eyebrows, a large nose, and a huge red cap. The amazing creature, without breaking its gaze, lightly tapped the floor with a stick, and noticing his wide eyes, tilted its head, tugged at its beard, and giggled. He closed his eyes, hoping the strange vision would dissipate, but it only got worse. Now he saw not one, but two gnomes. The second was slightly taller, or perhaps his bright blue cap just seemed bigger. "It's clear I've gone mad. These are hallucinations," he thought with surprising calmness, and quite strange and persistent ones. The apparitions were not about to disappear. On the contrary, they began to circle around him, making sounds that resembled a very familiar tune. Evidently attracted by this strange singing, a third gnome in a bright yellow cap joined them. Yes, it's clear. I've lost my mind, he thought again, observing the dance of the colorful caps with some pleasure. Well, at least I'm going mad cheerfully, with songs and dances. It could be worse, like scary spiders or skeletons. But these are such cuties. And they sing great, he noted to himself. What are they singing? Something very familiar, long forgotten, though it's impossible to forget. Oh my God, it's A Fir Tree Was Born in the Forest. Of course. He managed a difficult crooked smile and moved his lips, involuntarily repeating the words of the children's song. All right, everyone scram, quick! He heard a voice he immediately recognized. It was the same soft, silver-whispering timbre that had brought him peace last time. Now it wasn't whispering. It rang with angry notes, clearly addressed to the mischievous gnomes. In response, there was a chorus of stubborn snorting. Tommy, don't you dare go into this room! The voice came from somewhere to the side, and he couldn't see the speaker, still afraid to turn his head. But it's our room. Our stuff is here, came the chorus in reply. And I need to get under my bed. I just need to. And did you see the markers? Another voice added. And I don't want to sleep next to Tommy anymore. You know what he does in his sleep? I'll tell you in your ear later. We'll sort that out later, came the reply. Now hold hands and train yourselves out the door, quick. The gnomes obediently grabbed each other's clothes, and the one in front, taking full responsibility for the mission entrusted to him, dragged the colorful train away. Watching them go, he tiredly closed his eyes. It seemed he would have to learn to distinguish reality from visions, and at the same time come to terms with the fact that fairy tale creatures could calmly hop around, singing children's songs. How are you doing? A voice sounded above him, and he again felt the thin, slightly tart scent of freshness. Oh yes, you're doing very well. You can look here, at the tip of my finger. Good. Now I'll move it. Don't take your eyes off my finger. Good. That's it. Keep going. Keep looking at the finger. Why can't you? He really couldn't, but not because his eyes refused to obey. He simply didn't want to take them off the face leaning over him. A fairy? A mermaid? Who was this? What amazing creature stood so close that he could see the thin bluish vein on her temple? A vein? So, she's human? No, it can't be. There are no such creatures among people. People? They are coarser, denser, wider, heavier, louder. They are covered in skin with hair. They have bright, fleeting faces, and they constantly show their teeth in unnecessary smiles. However, she could well be a representative of any of the fairy tale races, as she had just ushered out a whole crowd of gnomes. So why shouldn't she herself be a dryad or a sylph? He had already resigned himself to being in some strange, frozen world. Her face, as if drawn with exquisitely fine calligraphic strokes. High, sharp cheekbones, almost straight eyebrows sweeping towards her temples, a small nose, delicately outlined lips, pale, matte translucent skin. Everything about this face was inexpressibly fine, graceful, light. It seemed woven from mist, from haze, and that a stronger puff would make the face melt, disappear, like fantastic figures in the clouds. She wasn't a beauty whose image is etched in memory forever. And yet, it was impossible to forget her, like a sunset or cherry blossoms, and impossible to keep her close, like the scent of a flower or a fading evening ray. But there was something in that face that held him firmly to the ground, preventing him from carelessly disappearing. Her eyes, huge, gray-blue. However, he wouldn't vouch for their color. It was possible that this amazing creature could change their color at will. And so it was. Just moments ago they were gray with a bluish tint, but after a moment they darkened, becoming the color of dark pearls, when their owner frowned in perplexity. But apparently the worry was unnecessary. Her forehead smoothed, her lips twitched in a slight smile, and now her eyes shone with warm, joyful blue aquamarines. Her eyes were extraordinarily expressive. They showed now anxiety, now a sly smile, now quiet sadness. They laughed and cried, rejoiced and grieved, joked and questioned. And for all this, their owner didn't need to open her mouth, speak words, shed tears, frown or smile, like ordinary people. He tore himself away from her face with difficulty and stared at the tip of a thin finger with a short, oval-shaped nail. "Can you hear me? Hello?" She leaned over him, looking intently into his eyes. This made him catch his breath and his throat tighten. "Look at me. That's it. Good. And now again. Look to the right. Now to the left. Good. Well, seems okay." She mumbled something in her elvish, "Human?" "Pupils are calm, temperature is normal, no nausea, eye movement is painless. Let's assume you got off with a slight scare." "Yes." He nodded joyfully. Not understanding a word, he would have agreed to anything just to keep her near. Suddenly it didn't matter where he was, what was happening to him, even who he was and why he couldn't remember. If all this was the price for meeting those incredible eyes, that elusive light smile, slightly anxious, pale lips, hands smelling of leaves, lemon and rain, well, he was happy to pay it. And then the fairy surprised him. With strong, deft, not at all ethereal hands, she unexpectedly lifted him by the shoulders and slid a pillow under them. "Well, now you need to eat," she said. After these simple, earthly words, he finally came to his senses. Until this second, he had been as if in a trance, watching the changing, amazing phenomena with fascination. The hypnosis ended, and immediately his head, ribs, leg, and for some reason the bandaged fingers on his right hand began to ache and throb. And his stomach rumbled, so loudly that she listened in surprise and nodded understandingly. A few minutes later, he was savoring, scalding himself, amber chicken broth with flecks of fragrant herbs from a large mug, probably some kind of magical potion. Then followed another light prick in the shoulder, after which the pain, which had been trying to snatch the mug of broth from him, quickly began to subside. "Well, that's good. Now you need to rest, and then we'll talk," she said, her eyes shining cheerfully. It seemed his appetite, which little could affect, pleased her. She helped him lie back on the bed and, dimming the brittle winter light, drew the curtain, although it seemed to him that she did it with some magical movement. "Tell me." He raised himself slightly, fighting the rapidly encroaching drowsiness. "The gnomes. Were the gnomes really gnomes?" She turned and laughed, as if scattering silver bells. "Yes, the gnomes really were there." "Good," he whispered to himself. So everything else was also true. So she really existed too. With this comforting thought, he fell asleep. His third awakening was simpler, much more pleasant than the previous ones. He lifted his eyelids without even remembering the fear of pain, and immediately began searching for his fairy with his eyes, as he mentally called this striking creature that left a disturbing charm. Disturbing because he still didn't understand anything, and for some reason didn't want to start understanding. He felt as if he was suspended between his past reality and a new, unknown one, and frankly, he didn't want to go back. Perhaps she sensed that he had woken up, and she appeared. Yes, she didn't walk in. She simply appeared, as if woven from air. "Good morning, afternoon, evening," she said, looking intently into his eyes. "An excellent sleep, one might even say outstanding." She pulled up a chair and sat down. "Well, let's talk." She tilted her head. "Do you remember anything?" "Of course, everything," he nodded. "You, the broth, the gnomes, all three of them, red, blue, and yellow. And you. And that's all? She asked again. And that's all. He nodded cautiously. How could he explain to her that for some reason he didn't want to remember anything else when he had her face, the scent of freshness from her thin hands, and the funny song about the fir tree? Well, all right. Let's start with the simplest. She was relentless. What's your name? My name? He was surprised. It turned out he had managed to forget that every person should have a name. My name is... Something was on the tip of my tongue, and it's gone. I don't remember. He shrugged apologetically. I don't know. Well, isn't that a pickle? And I don't know either, she sighed. You see, you had nothing with you. No documents, no phone, no card, absolutely nothing that could help us understand who you are, where you came from. Maybe you remember a name, an address, a phone number, anything at all? No. Apparently, you have amnesia. Temporary, we hope. Don't be scared. She looked at him doubtfully, obviously seeing no hint of fear. It happens quite often with head injuries, concussions. You need to rest well and try to remember yourself. How did I end up here? At your place? He asked, although he really wanted to say, with you. Listen, she smiled. It feels awkward using you like in an interview. Let's switch to we or us, shall we? Hey, what's wrong? Are you feeling bad? Is your head spinning? She asked anxiously, watching his tense face. Yes, something's wrong, or rather, about to be wrong. How awful! How could he admit to the magical fairy that he was being tormented by the most earthly, prosaic need? What was he supposed to do now? He looked at her with a shy plea. Ah, I see, she nodded calmly. Well, get up, let's go. You're not as unable to walk as you might think. By the way, that's even more reason for us to switch to we or us quickly. Such matters are easier to handle between good comrades, aren't they? He didn't even notice how, to the sound of her silver voice, he was awkwardly standing on his feet, favoring his tightly bandaged limb. Just a bad sprain, she explained, following his gaze. She slipped under his arm with a quick, flexible movement. That's how they hobbled to a place which, to his surprise, existed not only in the homes of mere mortals, but also in the dwellings of fairies. There he looked at his reflection and recoiled in fright. A gaunt man with dull, sleepy eyes, a scrape on his forehead covered by tangled hair, and a considerable 3-day stubble stared back at him from a cracked corner of the mirror. Aha, looking good. His hostess nodded cheerfully. But I must admit, all this somehow suits you. We even gave you a nickname, Noble Knight Bandit. The boys think you fought bravely, but couldn't stand against 100,000 enemies, she continued. Well, never mind. You'll get a little stronger now. I'll give you a razor, a comb, and you'll be shaved, decent, and boring again. He really wanted to ask who we were, what boys she was talking about, and why being shaved was boring, but he didn't dare. Well, she said when he was back on the bed. So, you don't remember anything? Well, then I'll tell you what I know. Maybe some memories will surface. Something will suddenly come to mind. All right. By the way, my name is Eleanor. Ellie. This is my apartment, she added, so you can stay here as long as you need, completely at ease. So, the fairy tale fairy, the enchanted creature, turned into a perfectly real young woman named Eleanor. But his involuntary inner tremor at the sound of her voice, the scent of her hands and hair, at the sight of her eyes, that didn't disappear. It only grew stronger with joy at the thought that all this belonged to someone who wouldn't disappear or deceive him. Half an hour later, he was thoughtfully fiddling with the edge of the fluffy blanket, going over everything Eleanor had told him. She had found him on the street, near her house, late in the evening, lying in a snowdrift, in just a shirt and jeans, beaten and unconscious. Asking a passerby for help, she had dragged him to the emergency room. They were asked to leave. He had no documents. And yet, at her requests, demands, pleas and threats, he was brought to consciousness, his head and leg bandaged, his fingers wrapped. To a clinic? I don't have one, sorry. So I brought you to my place, put you to bed. And then you know the rest, she finished simply. But don't worry, Ellie added. I'm not a doctor, but at least I can provide first aid and proper care. After all, I have 5 years of medical school behind me. She sighed lightly, thought about something, but then, as if catching herself, smiled easily and brightly. You'll rest for a couple of days. Maybe you'll remember something, she said. And anyway, you need to recover faster because New Year's is in a week. Something stirred, shifted slightly in his head, but then quieted down again. I see. So, you live here alone? He asked cautiously, still unaccustomed to using the informal address, posing a very important question for him. What if everything collapsed now? What if his fairy had a legitimate fairy partner? Maybe he was just away on a business trip or out on errands. Well, why alone? She chuckled, and his heart ached with longing. Completely alone. Although, to be honest, sometimes I really dream of solitude, even if just for a little while. You've already seen my company, she continued. That's how we live, the 4 of us, with the gnomes. You live with gnomes? He asked, shocked. With 3? He clarified. For some reason, the funny ambiguity of his question hung in the air. And suddenly, Ellie began to shake with quiet laughter. He looked at her in surprise, smiled uncertainly, chuckled, clutching his ribs against the pressing pain, wincing and groaning, and then burst out laughing himself. Aha! That's the kind of Snow White I am, though slightly short-changed by fate, Ellie laughed, finally transforming into a charming, earthly woman. I only have 3 gnomes, not enough for a full set. Calming down, wiping away the tears brought on by laughter, Ellie dropped an incredible fact on him, one that didn't fit her at all. It turned out that the gnomes were, of course, not fairy tale creatures at all, but children, little ones, twins Sam and Tom, 5 years old, and Ben, who was the same age. And when he first saw them, they were trying on costumes prepared for the New Year's party at kindergarten. Wait, I don't understand, he interrupted. If Sam and Tom are twins, and Ben is their age, they should be triplets, shouldn't they? He tried to understand why he wasn't at all shocked by the news that Eleanor had 3 children. Probably because everything about her had to be unusual, not like other women. Let her be earthly, and have a wonderful but quite ordinary name, and even have studied at university once. But she was still a miracle, extraordinary and incredible. She had 3 little ones. Well, that was a miracle too. Well, why necessarily triplets? Ellie smiled. Not necessarily, she replied. There's your riddle. Lie there and think. Very useful in your condition. Okay, we've done the dressings, you've slurped up the soup, I've given you the shot. Now sleep. He quickly reached out and clasped the thin hand, smelling of the same melody of greenery, coolness and freshness, and pressed it to his lips. He gasped in amazement. The palm, which he thought he held tightly with his bandaged fingers, literally dissolved, disappeared, leaving a slight coolness and a sweet bitterness on his lips. He moaned with pleasure, and as was becoming habit, sank into silence and darkness. One bright, calm day. Then another. His leg ached from the sprained tendon, his ribs complained painfully to each other, and one of his fingers suddenly swelled up like a sausage. And yet, he had never felt so good. He couldn't explain it. He lived in a small apartment, tried to help the constantly busy, now appearing, now disappearing Ellie, and remembered children's games. The kids were wonderful, healthy, slyly intelligent, without a drop of what brands kids from poor and single-parent families. They were more than provided with everything they needed: love, affection, care, and tenderness. All this was generously seasoned with songs, fairy tales, pancakes, games of hide and seek, rosy apples, and spaceships made of chairs. The twins, Tom and Sam, were charming blonde rascals, always plotting something. They constantly played tricks on everyone because no one but their mother could tell them apart. Ben, dark-haired, brown-eyed, slightly taller than his brothers, was completely unlike them, having inherited his appearance, obviously, from some distant ancestor. And his character was completely different, serious and calm. Perhaps this was explained by the eerie scar that split the boy's upper lip, making him seem to lisp when he spoke. Ellie called him Bunny. However, as soon as the boy entered the orbit of his brothers, there was no trace left of his thoughtfulness and seriousness, and 3 voices and 6 limbs united for common achievements. And suddenly, he began to remember. The second day of their life together was ending. The little ones started their usual cheerful roughhousing on the floor, but after a while, one of the twins slightly detached himself from the friendly tangle of arms, legs, and heads. Seized by an unexpected creative impulse, he began to sing, "Danny, Danny, let's go dig potatoes. Danny, Danny, let's go dig potatoes." His comrades supported him readily, willingly, and immediately. Ellie laughed, and he flinched and lunged forward, but got tangled in the blanket and nearly fell off the bed. "Potatoes! Danny, I remember," he gasped. "My name is Potatoes. I mean Danny. Daniel. I'm Daniel." "Well, hello, Daniel. Nice to meet you." She smiled, and her eyes shining, now bright blue like the sea under the sun, shook his hand. "Well then, Daniel," she said his name with pleasure. "The first step is taken. Now everything should go faster. And you probably need to go to the police. They must be looking for you, worried." Although she involuntarily looked at his washed and ironed but frankly worn-out jeans and shirt with a frayed collar. "Yes, I understand," he said. "I'm tired of you. Of you. I'm sitting here, eating you out of house and home. You're spending money on me, medicine, time, energy. And anyway, yes, I should leave. I understand everything, but I don't want to leave." The words burst out of him unexpectedly and surprised him as much as they did Eleanor. "Well, if you think so," she began. "Of course you can stay with us for a while longer, get stronger. Frankly, I'll be happy if you stay for a couple or 3 days. We have runny noses here, as always, all 3 of them together. They won't let us into kindergarten, and I can't stay with them right now. Lots of work, and New Year's is just around the corner. It's just awful," Ellie continued. "And on top of that, as if on purpose, Granny Agnes, our neighbor across the hall, is sick. Usually she helps me in such cases, so if you stay with the kids, you'll really help me out." My God, finally he could be useful to her. He suddenly wanted to fall to his knees, kiss Ellie's hands, and thank her for the honor of helping her. Frankly, he didn't understand how she managed everything. Early in the morning, she would rush off somewhere. By lunchtime, she would bring a pile of colorful paper, frames, folders, and, humming something, would cut and glue with enthusiasm. Then she would easily ladle pots in the kitchen, splash water in the bathroom, gather her mysterious crafts, and rush off. In the evening, the apartment would fill with boys. Shrieks, thuds, dirty sneakers and t-shirts, drawings, chomping, songs, arguments, and sometimes desperate roars. Finally, everything would quiet down, and Ellie would disappear, like the last ray of sun, sometimes for the whole night. She would appear at home as unnoticed as the first morning light, but clothes washed at some unknown time would be folded into neat piles. Fragrant rich soups, porridges, and stews would be simmering in pots. Everything would be in its place, and the boys would magically become clean and combed. How did she manage it? A mystery. Perhaps it was one of her magical secrets. Eleanor reluctantly told him about her life, or rather, said nothing at all, just smiled. So there was no doubt about the pointlessness of these stories. Why talk about the past? Couldn't he see that here and now she was absolutely serenely happy? That she was completely content with life, enjoyed every day, and only dreamed that, God forbid, nothing would change. Yet much of what surrounded her somehow didn't fit the concept of absolute happiness. However, could he judge what this amazing woman truly needed? Maybe she really was happy. Her frozen fingers, her lack of a winter-down jacket, and the sole of her boot threatening to fall off, which she was gluing, thinking no one saw, these were certainly not reasons to give up a cheerful walk with the boys. And what did it matter, for example, that the faded wallpaper was dark in the corners, the old refrigerator was shaking in its last throes, and only one burner on the stove worked properly? So what? Did all this interfere with the unrestrained fun in the house or make the dishes less tasty? No, quite the opposite. It was so fun and great to draw together on the faded wallpaper, and no one else had pictures like that on their walls. And perhaps it didn't matter at all that light, but noticeable shadows had settled forever under her amazing eyes, and her small collarbones stretched the thin, pale skin as if it were about to tear. Well, maybe that's how they were supposed to be, translucent, weightless. But really, where had he seen a fairy with rosy cheeks and extra weight? Realizing he wouldn't get anything out of Ellie anyway, Daniel looked more closely at everything around her and at the people living nearby. The house was small, 2-story, with a single entrance, very old, with a wide, creaking staircase. In 4 apartments, and everyone knew everything about everyone else, and a little more besides. The house was sick, celebrated, grieved, was indignant, and rejoiced. In short, it lived, and Eleanor was its small, brave heart. Daniel was convinced of this very soon. Holding onto the railing, the man was already quite skillfully hopping on his 1.5 legs, accompanying the gang of boys outside. "Here they are!" shouted Barbara, the neighbor from the ground floor, known behind her back as Auntie Barb, almost trampling them. She was known for her quarrelsome, suspicious nature, and was habitually in irreconcilable confrontation with one of her neighbors. Naturally, she was extremely displeased with the bunch of constantly chattering boys, leaving trails of footprints on the clean floor of the entrance hall, as well as balls, candy wrappers, stray cats, mittens, shovels, and God knows what else from the kids' senseless arsenal. "Sorry, I forgot to give instructions before going out," Daniel laughed, hobbling up to the woman standing in the pose of an avenging fury. "You can't teach them anything," she grumbled. "They're blockheads, all of them, one, the other, and the third." "Oh, come on, why say that?" Daniel shook his head. "They're wonderful kids, and so friendly. It's strange that only Ben is completely unlike Ellie or his brothers. Not a bit. And for some reason, he says he was born on June 10th, and the boys on the 25th. "Well, he's not Ellie's, and he's no brother to the twins," the neighbor replied. "I mean, he's not related to them. That soft-hearted fool took him from the maternity hospital along with her own. 2, of course, isn't enough, but 3 is just right. He's an orphan." She looked angrily at Daniel's puzzled face. "Don't you understand?" she asked. "Well, he was abandoned at the maternity hospital. His own mother abandoned him. He was born like that, a freak, with a cleft lip. And everyone wants perfect babies, like angels, as if they're going to live in paradise afterwards." The woman smiled bitterly and maliciously. "And so, she dragged 3 home, like a cat. Honestly," Barbara continued. "Sometimes she doesn't have enough to feed her own, and she took on someone else too." The years of bile that had permeated Barbara were clearly struggling with something bright and pure now, and suddenly, kindness won. The woman smiled, and her usual mask of grimness and wariness seemed to fall from her face. Though, of course, Ellie saved Ben. Where would he go like that? No one else would have taken him. A direct road to the baby home, and then to the orphanage. And there, can you imagine what would happen to him? Like that. There. They'd wear the boy out. That's all. And suddenly, as if catching herself, she grimaced. Her life will start from this. Well, not life, but hard labor. Now she's working her fingers to the bone at 3 jobs. Soon there'll be nothing left of her. And all of us women are fools. That's how we live, for who knows whom, giving ourselves completely, and then we're left with nothing. You work like a camel without rest, then you stand in the kitchen, then you sleep almost standing up, like a warhorse. She looked at Daniel, who had already started descending towards the exit of the building. No time to think about yourself. Go to the hairdresser, get a massage. Just live one day in your life just for yourself, like a real woman. I'm a woman too, by the way. And tell Ellie, if she's really going to decorate the tree in the yard, let her clean up the trash herself afterwards. Barbara's shouts were audible even after the entrance door closed behind him. Ah, so that's who Granny Agnes is these days. Daniel heard another woman's voice behind him, but a completely different one. Quiet, calm, slightly shaky. Just in case, he counted the boys scurrying in the snowdrift with his eyes and turned around. Behind him stood a short, slightly stooped old woman in a funny fur hat. Are you Daniel? Ellie told me about you. She smiled with an incredibly warm, kind smile, the kind only grandmothers have, making no distinction between their own and others' grandchildren. She found you, did she? And now she's nursing you back to health? She asked. It's not surprising. That's how she is, always has been, rushing to help everyone. It doesn't matter who is in front of her, a child, a sparrow, a man, a kitten, an old woman. Just don't tell Ellie that you saw me outside, she asked, smiling. She'll scold me for going out, she continued. She came running to me on her way to work this morning, took my blood pressure, brought pills, ordered me to lie down and not get up. But here I am. I had to go. I really need to get to the post office, send gifts to my grandchildren. My grandchildren are far away. My son Michael works there. I want to see my Mikey and the girls so much. I just can't stand it. She sighed and dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. No, I don't blame Mikey, she defended her son, unknown to Daniel. Where would he find the time? It's flying halfway across the country. They're busy people, both him and his wife. They don't forget me, don't you think? She added. They call me often. They worry too. They keep promising, we'll come, we'll definitely come. But when will they? No, I understand everything. I'm just very afraid, because I might die any day now and won't see them. She again wiped her eyes with her handkerchief, raised her bright, clear eyes, the kind only children and old people have, to Daniel, and smiled shyly. Oh, Danny, forgive me, I've been rambling on. She laughed a small, quiet laugh. You just reminded me of my Mikey. Well, it was nice meeting you. Just remember. Bidding farewell, she walked away, carefully clutching a package to herself, obviously with gifts for her granddaughters. And he, who hadn't said a word to her, watched her go for a long time, unaccustomedly longing for someone else's separation. The boys, having had their fill of playing, tumbled into the entrance hall in a noisy crowd, covered from head to foot in soft snowballs. Daniel, unable to keep up, hobbled behind. A leather glove lay on the landing of the first floor. He drops them all the time, one of the boys reported authoritatively from above. He lives in the second apartment. Daniel rang the doorbell, and a few seconds later, a thin woman with a tired face and dull eyes opened it. Ah, David? Daniel stammered, fiddling with the glove in his hand. The woman waved towards the room. A man was sitting on an old sofa, broad-shouldered with regular features, black wavy hair. Even if he were 100% man who preferred to admire female beauty, Daniel couldn't help but admit, the man sitting before him was very handsome. He was out of place and time here, among the faded wallpaper, old furniture, and dusty, stale air. He should be shining with intelligent eyes on a movie screen, be a gym teacher. But the man couldn't do any of that. Not stand, not run, not jump. Nothing. Because his legs, helpless, unnaturally thin, and lifelessly still, tethered him to the cracked, long unpainted floor more securely than multi-ton shackles. He raised his head and smiled. "Again?" he said. "No, really. I'll ask Mom to sew an elastic band. I walk, but figuratively. That is, I ride. I used to ride." "What about a wheelchair?" Daniel asked cautiously. "It's called a wheelchair," the man said, without self-pity and with a familiar, old, therefore calm pain. "Even without a leg, I still have privileges. I can sit in my chair even in the presence of the head of the country," he added. However bitter he felt, he couldn't help but smile and laugh. "Ellie came up with that for me, it helps. And anyway, if it weren't for her, I might have been, well, never mind. And I have a chair. Yes, there it is." David waved towards where a pile of metal on wheels was heaped up. "My old one. It's been repaired 10 times, and all for nothing. It keeps breaking. And a new one is very expensive, and you have to wait for a free one. So I sit, waiting like a miracle from Santa Claus." From the words of the handsome young man, sitting helplessly trapped within 4 walls, there was such a sense of hopelessness that Daniel lowered his eyes. And when he raised them again, he blinked in surprise. There was a painting on the wall. At first, Daniel took it for a painted city landscape, a narrow street between old houses, a wet pavement reflecting the yellowish light of lanterns, and a lonely, thin human figure. And suddenly Daniel straightened up and looked closer. The painting seemed to come alive, to stir. He even thought the little figure took a small step forward. Was he having hallucinations again? He glanced back at David in a panic. He nodded his head and smiled. Daniel walked closer and gasped. The painting was 3-dimensional. The houses seemed to protrude from the frame, like real ones, and it seemed that light would soon light up in the windows. A tram would turn the corner. Look, the rails gleamed between the houses. And the figure would hop in place and hurry about its business. "Scientifically, it's called paper toll, a technique for creating 3-dimensional paintings," David explained to the astonished Daniel. "And simply put, it's called Ellie's Little Miracle. It's her painting. She gave it to me a long time ago. I just look at this street, and sometimes it seems to me that I myself am walking along it, breathing the air after the rain, afraid of getting hit by a tram." "My God, what a happiness it is to be afraid of getting hit by a tram!" David exclaimed. "Ah, well," he decided to change the subject. "How is it? You've been staying at her place for several days and haven't seen any of her paintings? Although yes, she doesn't keep them at home. As she once said, she's afraid of falling into self-admiration." "What do you mean, nothing to leave?" David continued. "She just makes them and sells them right away. Money is needed for the boys, for all this charity of hers. And she also works shifts at the hospital, washes dishes in a restaurant. And I sit." David pulled the pitiful remnants of his legs towards him and smiled. "Can you imagine," she once told me, "Davy, I've calculated that to buy you a new chair, I only need to make 86 paintings. I've already made 10, only trifles are left. Isn't she a fool?" A few hours ago, Daniel had already heard Ellie called a fool. But then the shrill female voice boiled with misunderstanding and bile, so the word was poisonous. Now the disabled young man pronounced it softly, gently, carefully, and it sounded like a tender, touching, timid confession. "Are you leaving soon?" Brown-eyed Ben looked at Daniel seriously, intently. "Are you tired of me, huh?" The man nodded playfully at the boy. "Getting in your way here. Yesterday I accidentally ate Sam's apple." "No, it's just, you see, I really love apples. Since I was a kid, I always ate several, even with the core." Daniel froze. Something inside his head violently surged, jumped, like a fish thrown onto the shore, trying to return to where everything was familiar and clear, but losing strength, it quieted down again. That wasn't Sam's apple, it was mine. He ate his right away anyway. What does that have to do with anything? He heard Ben's voice and looked at the boy bunny in confusion. I'll give you all of mine. The twins will give you theirs too, Ben continued. Just don't leave us. At least until New Year's. Why? Daniel was amazed. I'm no use to you. Mom just doesn't cry anymore, Benny explained patiently and somewhat frighteningly because of the seriousness in his eyes. Since you came to us, she hasn't cried once, Ben said. She thinks I don't see, and nobody sees. But I see, and nobody should cry on New Year's. Everyone should be happy. Like us, like me. Ben said the last words confidently. The little boy, born to be disadvantaged, held his head high, boasting about something he couldn't possibly have. Happiness. Ellie. Daniel looked at her. This smell. So fresh. What is this smell? Oh, this smell. She was surprised. Ah, it's verbena. I always loved it. And it scares the boys away like mosquitoes. If I use a little too much, they start sneezing and leave me alone. Daniel, what's wrong? He swayed, closed his eyes, and clutched his head. It hummed. Verbena. Of course, the freshness of wet leaves and citrus. That's the smell of verbena. Mom, this is my gift, son. These are my favorites. Daniel, we're losing the contract. Deal with this immediately and personally. You're something else, Miller. 18,000 euros for a week's vacation. Only you could do that. And the reports will be there. That's what's expensive. I need to change my car. Or rather, you need to change my car. Danny, stop eating apples with cores and stems. Really, what's that about? You'll have stomach problems. USA? That restaurant? Buy it out? Oh, how about the one where we had such a blast with those? Well, you know. Mr. Daniel Miller, one call from you and the delivery is ours. Oh, Danny, you finally snagged that watch with the diamonds. How much did you pay? How much? $500,000? Well, actually, that's not bad. How can you live in this apartment? The split system is useless here. Miller, do you remember? The day after tomorrow, the whole company is flying to the Champions League final. 5 boxes reserved. Phrases, whole and fragmented. Voices, engine noise, crowd shouts, computer whispers, racing car roar, mobile ringtone, clinking silverware, airport announcements. All this fell on Daniel like a mountain avalanche, swirling in his head tumultuously, as if trying to quickly find and reclaim their lost places. I remember, he gasped. I remember. I'm Daniel Miller. I'm 34 years old. I live downtown. I'm so happy for you. Her eyes shone. So happy. It's so great to remember yourself. It's like you gave yourself to yourself for the new year. She laughed. So, you have somewhere and someone to go back to? He nodded. Wonderful. A light shadow fell on her face and disappeared faster than he could blink. Just wonderful. Well then, goodbye. We'll miss you. And please, don't forget anything anymore. She touched his cheek more with a breath, a scent, warmth, than with her lips, and disappeared, as dreams should. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth. That was him, Daniel Miller. The boy, the only son of a very wealthy businessman, grew up, of course, in complete comfort, provided with everything imaginable, especially after losing his mother early. Daniel received an excellent education, polished to a blinding shine, and the position of future heir to a large firm. And along with that, he received a destiny, pre-planned down to the smallest detail, from which it was almost impossible to escape. However, the path was comfortable, luxurious, and the object of constant envy from others. When Daniel turned 30, his father fully handed over the affairs of the large company to him. And along with that, he took on the duties of the life of the party for a group of rich young businessmen, convinced that everything could be bought and sold. The only question was the price. They bought and sold cars, companies, honor, clothes, foreign resorts, women, health, conscience, restaurants. Only Daniel suddenly began to notice that with the years the price kept rising, and what was bought kept getting worse. Life began to offer outright garbage, from which his head ached with longing and his heart grew indifferently cold. And then, at the very end of the year, there was a half-joking bet. When was the last time you worked so that you weren't just tapping on a laptop, shouting into a phone, and bossing secretaries around, but really, with your hands? One of them started. What can you even do? Take away your credit cards, your supercars, and you'll starve to death in a week. I still remember your screams on the plane that people with illnesses should fly on separate flights. When was that? Daniel replied. And anyway, that's not what this is about. I can easily live without money. Bet? Daniel held out his hand. Bet! His friend exclaimed. My driver's parents are just moving out of an old communal apartment. There's your place to live. Just remember, you're giving up everything. Your watch, your ring, your sneakers worth $100,000, all your credit cards, phones, and we'll be monitoring your accounts. You're not getting my porcelain teeth, Daniel grumbled. That would be great, his friend chuckled. All right, you convinced me. Until Christmas. On our Christmas trip. Deal? They shook hands in front of a large crowd of cheerful witnesses. That's how Daniel Miller ended up on the outskirts, more like a slum than a city district, in an old, half-empty apartment with leaky pipes. For 2 days he honestly held out, so to speak, on his subcutaneous fat, and then, to get food, he almost got into a fight with stray dogs he encountered. He managed to get hired to unload a huge truck full of groceries. Dragging another box, he slipped on a banana peel, discarded by someone's shoe. He felt quick, rough fingers searching his pockets and pulling the not-so-great jacket off his shoulders. And then there was cold, darkness, and silence, pain and fear. The smell of verbena, the song about the little fir tree that's cold in winter, and an adventure the length of a small life. Gnomes and a handsome disabled man, a poor little apartment, a paper masterpiece on the wall, a lonely old woman, and the most delicious chicken broth in the world. But most importantly, huge shining eyes, a silver voice, and thin, strong hands with protruding bones. All this couldn't be bought with money. Or could it? He arrived at the familiar house and immediately saw Ellie. She was decorating a large, fluffy fir tree standing in the middle of the yard. "Daniel!" she exclaimed, her gaze sweeping over the huge black SUV, the perfectly fitting coat on the man, the shining shoes, and she smiled. "I see you really had something to remember." "Yes, well," he said, not knowing what to do with his hands, his eyes, or himself at all, from the sharp feeling that he was completely alien here. How could this be? It had been so good just recently. They smiled at him. They loved him. Poor, sick, remembering nothing, he was one of them here, and he was happy. And now? What now? Ellie seemed to guess his thoughts and asked, "So what now?" "I wanted to. Thank you." He pulled a plastic card from his pocket. "What is this?" she asked with her eyes. He had never seen that look in her eyes before, and he thought he had already studied all the shades of her eyes. Now they were gray steel, and he stammered. "Ellie, well, it's money. For you, for the boys. You know, for repairs or clothes. No, don't think. There's a lot, really a lot. You need money, I know you do." "Yes, I do," she nodded, and the silver notes disappeared from her voice too. "But not this kind, and not from you." "Well, Ellie, let's not—" "And you did spend money on me. I ate and drank at your place for almost a week. What else?" "Is this for help?" she repeated thoughtfully. "Well, thank you, of course," she said. "But I don't take money for help, or for friendship, or for— in short, I don't need anything from you." She shook her head and added with a smile, "Imagine, we thought you were a noble bandit, but you're just a rich shopkeeper. We were wrong. I was wrong. Again. What a pity." He sat in negotiations, observing the people detachedly. Opening up? Just help? He loved her. Could you hurt someone you love? Or could you? What had he done? Of course he had hurt her, insulted her. Because feelings, real feelings, cannot be bought. They can only be received as a gift. How simple. Why had he forgotten this so quickly? How had he forgotten the disabled man trapped within walls, Granny Agnes, and the thin hands smelling of his mother's perfume? "Idiot! Cretin! Moneybag!" Daniel suddenly exclaimed. "You know, Mr. Daniel Miller," the astonished interlocutor said, standing up, "perhaps our terms are not the most suitable for you, but I would still ask you—" "Oh, I'm sorry," Daniel laughed. "I wasn't talking about you, I was talking about myself. I'm leaving now, my deputy will sign everything. I don't have time, forgive me, I have to run." "I have so much to do. After all, tomorrow is New Year's, it's time for dreams to come true." On December 31st, he patiently watched Ellie and her old neighbor untangling garlands with 4 hands. "Oh, wait, Daniel! What are you doing? You're getting in my way. Oh, there, I broke a bulb on the garland because of you." "And in the evening we're all gathering at the tree," Ellie exclaimed. "Granny Agnes, don't bundle the boys up too much, okay? It's warm outside." "Granny Agnes won't be able to come to the tree. A car will be here for her in an hour," Daniel suddenly said. "What?" the women asked in unison and looked at him in amazement. "Yes, yes. Get ready, Granny Agnes," Daniel confirmed. "They'll come for you, take you to the airport, and you'll fly to your son and his family to celebrate New Year's. Your granddaughters are really looking forward to seeing you. They're making you gifts. I called your son, he even dropped his phone from joy. He'll meet you." "But how can I?" The old woman was flustered. "Danny, I won't make it, I'll die." "You won't die," Daniel nodded decisively. "It's a private jet. There will be a doctor with the necessary equipment with you constantly to help you just in case." "I'm flying!" The old woman nodded decisively and even stamped her foot. "No, not yet," Daniel thought. "He hasn't earned that yet. I need to visit your neighbor from the first floor, too." David. Daniel, limping, entered the apartment, pushing a light but stable wheelchair in front of him, which looked more like a modern, stylish minicar for one. "This, of course, won't replace your legs, but you know it's an amazing thing," Daniel began. "Maneuverable, light. To be honest, I rode it myself for half a day. Everything is adjustable: armrests, footrests, backrest, headrest. Dave, honestly, it's more comfortable than in an expensive foreign car. And most importantly, electric drive, 50 kilometers without recharging. I don't envy whoever goes for a walk with you. You'll wear anyone out now, and the wheels can handle anything: asphalt, snow, even the desert." David. "Oh, come on. It's just a chair. Walk, David, as much as you want. Walk." Daniel felt his hand squeezed by surprisingly strong, warm, and honest fingers. "So, are you getting used to the new machine?" He nodded to David's mother, bewildered, disbelieving, not knowing whether to cry or laugh, but who had already shed her hopelessness and despondency somewhere. She looked at her son and frankly admired him. "We're expecting everyone at Ellie's tree tonight. After all, New Year's is soon." They finally gathered in the yard, by the fir tree shining with garlands, under a light snowfall. The boys, whom they had difficulty tearing away from a mountain of gifts. David, incredibly handsome, looking confidently ahead, obviously into the distances he would roll in his new chair, his mother, 20 years younger. Eleanor. He had no one to compare her to, his beloved, and there was no need to. "Oh, look who decided to show up!" came Barbara's inimitable creaky voice. Well, I'll be. So our foundling turned into a prince. Who would have thought? Ah, if I'd known, I would have nursed you myself. She headed for the entrance, throwing over her shoulder. Ellie, first thing tomorrow morning, pick up all the paper from the crackers, get the prints out for the cleanup too, don't forget. Barbara, wait, Daniel started, catching up with the neighbor. Wait, Barbara, this is for you. He handed the woman a rectangular envelope. What's this? She stared at Daniel suspiciously. It's a certificate for a full day at a beauty salon for you, he explained. Massage, manicure, hairdresser, masks, what else? Lots of things, whatever you want. But remember, you said, a whole day just for yourself like a real woman? Well, here you go. Happy New Year. Barbara looked at Daniel and Ellie, at the envelope with her beautiful female desires, at the fir tree lit up with lights, and it was unclear what was shining on her cheeks, perhaps snowflakes falling on them and melting from the warmth. And what did Santa Claus give you? Ellie smiled. Nothing yet. He shook his head sorrowfully. He doesn't need anything except what one young woman has. She just won't give it to me. Either she doesn't want to, or she can't. She can. Her voice whispered like silver. Maybe she wants to, very much. She's just shy. It's all yours, Ellie whispered. And only for you. Take it, possess it, play and rejoice, just don't leave it for long. Ellie and Daniel sat side by side, pressed close together, in the yard, on a bench near the tree. There was complete silence around them, and it seemed to them that there was no one else in the world but the two of them. However, all lovers think that way. Quiet, light snow fell from the sky, sifting down in delicate, weightless flakes. The tree, sparkling with lights, swayed a fluffy branch, and Daniel simultaneously imagined that a tall old man with a white beard would peer out from behind it, shake his staff at them and ask sternly, "And who is giving out gifts left and right here instead of me?" The snow fell quietly, making the world whiter, cleaner, and kinder, worthier of the new year. Without a doubt, a happy and bright one. And I've solved your secret, Daniel's whisper sounded. Ellie purred, snuggling against his side. It's very simple. If you want to be happy yourself, make someone else happy. And somewhere far away, as if agreeing with him, the New Year's chimes struck softly, resonantly, and joyfully.